So we'll start our discussion. You see, so last class, so we have discussed about this ground motion parameters. Okay, so we have seen response spectra, then Fourier spectra, power spectral density, wavelets, and other things are there. So many things are there. So nowadays, but the classical things are even now, which we use is response spectra, which is once designed, that is the one which is very everybody uses in the Fourier amplitude spectra. So that is also widely used in practice. So these wavelets and others, although that is still under research kind of a thing, but it is too complicated because you are going from one dimensional graph to two dimensions, time and this is coming into picture. It's very difficult to understand, or how to include this in the design, say. So that is a little bit challenges are there. So now duration also we have seen. So there are several durations are there. Finally, so the duration which everybody uses is this Husserl plot. Okay, so that is 95% to 5%. So this is the one which is the widely used, 5% to 95% of energy. So apart from that, we have RMS, characteristic intensity. Many variables are there, like cumulative absolute velocity, which is widely used in nuclear reactors. So to find out, you see, like what time whether the time history can create any damage, say. Okay, so they calculate this CAV. Suppose if the CAV, say, if it is less than 0.016 g second, so it means the ground motion, it will not be damaging kind of thing. Suppose if it is more than 0.016 g, say, so they say that it can cause damages to the structure itself. So like that, there are so many parameters are there: response spectrum, acceleration spectrum, EPA, EPV, like that. So if you summarize, so almost some 21 to 30, of course, every 5-6 years, a new parameter also comes into picture. So if we summarize all those things, something around 21 parameters are there. Now maybe some more things also may be there itself. Okay. So many are there. So now, as already I told you, you would have that if you have downloaded the data, say. Okay, so for the data, you can get all these numbers itself. So you can plot actually how they look like, how these spectrums and other things look like this itself. So now, before we go to this one, I just wanted to mention that so I hope this paper is there. Okay, so this is a paper which I think Bhargavi is there. So which we there where we have discussed about all these parameters itself. Okay, so it is available in Google, that is a natural hazard journal. So here for all the Indian data, say. Okay, so we have computed all these parameters. So you also you can read this, and then you can, we have discussed in great detail. Okay, so how these parameters vary with the distance, how many earthquakes are there for the almost all the Indian earthquakes are there. So this is a ground motion parameters, the details are there. So you can see ASI, all other parameters are there. I think some table also is there. So this is for some typical Indian time history, say like Gujarat earthquake, how the evolutionary things looks like, like this we have done, and all the details are explained here. So if some of you are interested, say, so you can go through this paper, and then you have to write a small MATLAB code yourself. Okay, so to get all these parameters given a data itself. So you can just go through. I will send you it in our WhatsApp the group also, this paper. Okay, so these are the total parameters which are there now itself. So now, after getting all the parameters from the data, so it is like generally in our structural engineering, say, like people do a lot of experiments, we collect lot of data sets. So what we do is, once you have lots of data, say, so we do like a empirical equations we develop, or design equations essentially. Okay, like in our code book you would have seen. So many design equations will be there, like net tensile rupture strength, or concrete or steel, say. You will have lot of simple empirical formulas will be there, which they use in design itself. So now in our earthquake engineering also, so now we have lots and lots of amount of data sets is there, sir. You can find out all these important parameters which are of engineering interest. Okay, so then once you have collected lot of data, say, now you have to develop some type of a design equation which can be used by the practicing engineers, okay, to predict these parameters for some future events itself. So this already I told in the last class. In the olden days, we used to call them as attenuation equations. Now, of course, the new word is ground motion prediction. The equations itself. So these stochastic things we will come later on. This is seismological models. So these are like a typical equations, like in our structural engineering or in our code books. Very these equations should not be too complex, and it should not be too simple also. Something like simple equations, like y is equal to mx plus c, or some kind of a thing where if I give magnitude, if I give distance, I should get my ground motion parameter, which I can use in my design or whatever way I like. So this what we said. So the dependent variables is there. So we call them as generally when you do regression analysis or some type of thing, you have to identify. Okay. So now our inputs and outputs kind of a thing. So like PGA is a design variable, then P ground velocity, spectral acceleration say. So these are the most important design variables for engineers. Apart from that, as already I told you, nowadays the trend is RES intensity, V by height, so many things are those 21 parameters. So all those parameters are all dependent variables. So now we want to develop some type of a simple equations. Okay. So the inputs to these equations, you can say magnitude, they will vary with magnitude, then the distance, the site condition, or something like that. So some type of a equation has to be developed from this data itself. So now anyway, moment magnitude is the one which is widely used. Long back also we have made a statement, and now everybody uses moment magnitude itself. And then coming to the distance, as already I told in the last class, we have epicentral distance, we have hypocentral distance, and lot of distance measures are there. The problem is as follows. See, like you can see, this is for the Nepal earthquake. Okay. For the Nepal earthquake, say. So this is the slip, that is the earthquake rupture, we say, the rupture model. So how the crack has propagated inside the earth. So I'm just projecting it onto the surface. So surface projection, say. So surface projection of that rupture, that is the fault. So with this Nepal earthquakes, its magnitude was somewhere around 7.86, and it occurred in 2015. Okay, so these are the dimensions actually. So this much portion of the fault has ruptured, due to this earthquake itself, and its epicenter is here. Okay, so this is the epicenter, and these are all the aftershocks. Okay, so that you ignore here. So now if I see this rupture model, say, the maximum slip, they say, like how much it has displaced, that is where it occurs somewhere here. So this portion, so this red color, whatever you can see here, so this entire region, say, so this is the region where the maximum slip has happened, like 3 meters, it has crack has propagated, whereas here it is very small actually. Now if I see Kathmandu, say, okay, so now for Kathmandu, what is the distance of Kathmandu, like which distance, like now we are having several distances. One distance is the epicentral distance. So epicentral distance of Kathmandu is some 60 kilometers, or maybe you followed it 70 kilometers or something like that. Now if I take Bharatpur, this station, say, so you will have some distances. Lamjung, if you see here, the epicentral distance to Lamjung is very small, some 20 kilometers or 10 kilometers only. But when this earthquake occurred, say, what happened was at Lamjung actually, the damages are very little damage is there. But at Kathmandu, then at Bidur, these stations, there was a very high damages was there. And the epicentral distance to Lamjung was very small, whereas epicentral distance to Kathmandu was very large actually. So now, you tell me, you see, which distance you should use here, which represents correct distance actually. See whether epicentral distance has any meaning here.
No, sir.
Yeah. So what is all these cities, Kathmandu, Bhaktapur, all of them are located on top of the fault itself. So and distance, you see, this fault itself is some 100 kilometers or something like that. Okay. So when you go near to the fault, say, epicentral distance, focus distance, they are all useless actually. See, epicenter is here. Epicenter is just the starting point of the earthquake. But if you see the faults, the maximum energy was located here, this small portion, you see. So this is a region, you see, where the maximum the energy has been related. So generally where the damages will be, so it will be depend on the epicentral distance, or depends on what quantity. Yeah, so damages depend, so here the damages depend on what?
Rupture distance.
Rupture distance, or where the maximum energy has been released. Okay, so like this, so we have a problem. So this is also the 2011 Japan earthquake, Tohoku. You followed, that is magnitude 9 magnitude, the earthquake itself. Now you can see these are all the stations. You can see here, this is a Japan. Now the length of the fault planes, so this much portion of the fault has ruptured actually, almost, I think, if you see the scales, some 500 or maybe you see 600 kilometers, so this much region has been ruptured, and width also maybe some 100 or 80 kilometers or whatever, 100 or 120. So this much portion of the fault has ruptured. Now epicenter is here, you can see. So this star is the epicenter here. Now if I take this stations IWTH1, okay, so now this is my epicentral distance. If I take my GH, this say, so this is my epicentral distance. If I take IRH, say, so this is my epicentral distance. And now if you see the rupture, say, so this is the rupture, the slip map or for this earthquake. So where the rupture was, so the rupture was very close to the epicenter only. So this region is the highest, the energy has been released here itself. So here also the question comes, epicenter is a useless concept actually. Okay, it is a starting point of this one. So sometimes if epicentral distance is more, say, that doesn't mean that the damages will not be there, or ground motion will be very small, because for large magnitude earthquakes, say like 50 kilometers or the 500 to 600 kilometer by 100 kilometer, that fault whole entire portion will rupture itself. So now so you follow, right? So what is, how do you measure a distance actually, essentially? So it doesn't have any the meaning itself. Now this station, say if you see IBRH station or TCGH station, all the epicentral distance may be very far, say, but because they are all very close to the fault rupture. So you can see, so epicentral distance is one thing. If I say fault rupture, say this is the distance. So closest distance to rupture, so like you see, so the people have defined many distance measures. So like some people say that epicentral distance is useless. Closest distance to rupture, like last class I told, closest distance to this, and so many things comes into picture itself. Okay, so this is a problem with epicentral distances. Now this also I'm showing you Chichi earthquake basically. Okay, it is in 1999, Taiwan. Its magnitude was also some 7.6 magnitude earthquake itself. So these are all the stations. So this is the fault act. This red one is the where the surface, this fault you can see on the surface itself. Okay, so this fault has been there. And then these are all the stations, and this is the epicenter, that is Central Weather Bureau of Taiwan. Okay, so this is the epicenter. Now if you see TCU 52 station actually, so epicentral distance is very long, almost if you can see in kilometers, I have marked here some 50 kilometers or something. Then a TCU 72, say, so these are all very large, you see the epicentral distance. TCU 68, say, very large epicentral distances, but ground motions are extremely high at all these stations. This TCU 52 or 68, no, you can see the maximum accelerations was recorded here, but epicenter distance, if you see, it is very far. Now suppose if I take a TCU 129 station, say, which is very close to the epicenter, the ground motions are very small itself. And CHY, this station, say, epicentral distance is very small. So generally our understanding is, as epicentral distance increases, the PGA decreases or something. That doesn't work actually. So epicentral distance, focus, or hypocentral distance, these are all these concepts, you see, they don't even work at all, or especially to describe the ground motion, say. It is a very and essentially when your stations are very close to the fault, it's becomes very difficult, or what is the exact distance measure. So now at TCU 68 or TCU 52, why the ground motion was very high? Yeah, why the ground motion was very high? Epicentral distance is far away, but fault has ruptured actually from this portion to this portion. So if you see this figure, say the fault rupture or something. So this is a epicenter. So epicenter was somewhere here. You can see TCU 75 is here, but TCU 52 had the maximum ground motion. Although its epicentral distance was very high. Why? Can you see this figure and tell me why TCU 52 will have high ground motion when it compared to TCU 75 or TCU the CHY 024?
Energy dissipated is large there.
Rupture? No, what is that used to? No.
There is a large energy dissipation at TCU.
Large energy has been released here. So largest slip, say. So this portion you followed, right? Most of the energy has been released here actually. So now you can tell me, you see the concept of epicenter or focus, say, it is just you followed, right? A useless concept actually. Okay, so that doesn't work in practice. So epicentral, so you are close to epicenter, that doesn't make any sense. So close to epicenter means you are close to the starting point of an earthquake, but that doesn't mean that you are unsafe or nothing like that. But if you are close to the fault, say, that is the problem here. So TC 52, that was very high because of this large, slip, which energy release which happened, you see, near that station itself. So this is a challenging thing in, in our seismology also, how to do, what is the distance parameters, say, because faults are not, the point sources. This is the most important thing. Okay, because the faults are not point sources, they are finite sources. So they are all, a finite source itself. So how do you describe a finite source is a big deal. Now also there is no answer. Okay, so people use this, people use that, but you follow, right? There is nothing is there. So if you see many ground motion prediction equations, say, okay, so a lot of confusion is there. Somebody uses epicentral, somebody uses hypocentral, somebody uses distance to asperity, they say. So they say this they use. Then RUP they use, RJB they use, they say that the fault is buried below, say. You project the fault onto the surface and then you calculate the nearest distance to RGB, like that they say. So RGB, this is the one which is widely used. So this is like, you say, a distance to the surface rupture basically. Then RUP also is this one. So if you take Nepal earthquake, say, okay, now what is Kathmandu? What is the distance of Kathmandu? What is the epicentral distance is very high, because epicentral distance is this much, is this one. Now what is RJB for Kathmandu? Tell me. What will be the RJB? See, RJB is what? See, we have said, right? RJB is, you can see here this figure. So RJB is nothing but you project the rupture to the surface. So the distance for the closest distance to rupture, say. So this we are calling as RJB distance. So what is RJB for Kathmandu now? Or Gurkha, or all these stations, Bhaktapur, Lalitpur, all these stations are there. So what is RJB? Even Bharatpur also. What is RJB?
Nearly zero. There lies on rupture plane.
So they are all located on the rupture plane itself. So RJB is 0 itself, but epicentral distance is not 0. You followed. So RJB is 0, and that is also another issue. You followed, right? Like if we say be there, Kathmandu, all these stations, the distance is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Say that also, it doesn't mean that RJB 0 means ground motion will be very high, or it may not happen. So if RJB is 0 for Bharatpur, Lalitpur, Hitwara, all these stations, but the damages at Hitwara, Hetwada are very less compared to Kathmandu, because Kathmandu is very closely located to this rupture plane also. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that, you see, RJB is fine, but in practice, that also has a problem. It's not that epicentral distance is waste. RJB is good, or RUP is good. So there also we have a lot of issues are there. Okay, but right now, all the papers, if you see, study in seismology, all this GMP, say, everybody uses nowadays is RJB, RUP kind of a thing people are using itself. But in our India, say, okay, so the unfortunate thing is in India, we don't have these finite source models for last several, the earthquakes. So you followed, right? So these type of slip models are available for US or many other countries, but in India we don't have much data on all these issues. So in India, still people use epicentral distance or hypocentral distance only, because it's very difficult to get all these numbers itself. So this is how, because you have to do a lot of work in the ground, and then the surface projection of ruptures and all those things have to be done itself, but that is not available in our country. Okay, so anyway, these are the two which are widely used. So like we say, so this shows you, suppose if it is, the fault is like this, perfect dip is 90-degree angle actually. Okay, so if dip is 90 degrees, say, so this is hypocentral distance. So if it is the starting point of the fault, say this is hypocentral, this is seismogenic depth, they say this is R up. You can see R up means the topmost, topmost, the closest distance to the top of the fault. Okay, so these are up. RJB is you project this to the surface. So this is my RJB here. So now for the same stations, I can get a different R hypocentral, I can get a different R up, I can get a different RJB. Now suppose if it is a dipping fault, say, so like the fault is like this actually, it is dipping like this. So this is my hypocentral distance, this is my R up actually, the closest distance to the rupture here, and RJB is 0 itself because it is lying on the top of the fault itself. Now suppose if the fault is like this, say, okay, so RJB station is here, so you have to project this fault onto the surface. So this is my RJB, now this is my R up, then hypocentral distance also you followed, right? I can measure also. So the problem in practice is there is a lot of confusion now also, which distance gives you a good the thing till now also you followed, right? Which is the best measure. So best measure, say, for distance. So still it is not the known actual. So which is the best, so you can have variety. So generally some equations are that people say they would have developed. Okay, they would have used RJB, somebody uses RF, somebody uses R hypo, somebody uses RAP. So there is a lot of confusion is there. But mostly all the international people right now they are using RJB or RF, but there also we have a lot of problems in practice itself. So this is how the things you see they look like. So now and finally say, so now when you develop these type of empirical equations, the most important thing which comes in practice is in the olden days, that is in around 1970 or 1960s. What people used to do is, at that on those days the data was very small, so they whatever data was available, say whether it has come from where, people were not worried actually. Okay, it is from America or it is from India, Koyna region or Himalaya or whatever. So people used to take all the data and then they used to fit a equation kind of a thing without going into so many details. But around 1970, 1971, as more and more number of data came into picture, then you followed it. People found out that this a tectonic environment is a very the important thing, or this has to be modeled in GMPs. They have found out the data shows a variety of, you followed, right, the differences actually between these environments. So what they have done in the olden days is they have defined all the whole earth, say all the tectonic plates into or the earthquake occurring regions into three portions. One is active region, they say. So active region means, you followed it, it is a plate margin essentially. Okay, so plate margins, this they call as you followed it active regions, like in our India, say the Himalayas essentially. Okay, so the Himalayas is a plate boundary, so this is a active region. Now we have another thing what we call as a stable tectonic region also. So the stable tectonic region, you see, it is far away from the plate boundaries, like our South India essentially. So this is another you see, so the ground motions in South India, the ground motions in Himalaya, both of them are entirely different itself. Then we have another thing which we call as a subduction zone, where one tectonic plate, say, thrusts beneath or subducted by another tectonic plate. But here also there are a lot of things are there. So essentially like Indo-Burma region, say, okay, or Andaman. These type of regions are so here also there are so many things are there, interface event, interslab and other things are there. So they have found out these differences. See what the philosophy they give is, see, like for example, say if a 6 magnitude or 7 magnitude earthquake. Okay, so 7 magnitude earthquake if it occurs in Himalayas, and same 7 magnitude say if it occurs in South India. Okay. So what they have found out was, here if it is 7 magnitude earthquake, say in Himalayas, what happens is the energy, say it travels in a, in South India, say the energy, 7 magnitude earthquake occurs in South India, the energy released during an earthquake, it travels up to large distances. But whereas in Himalayas, if any earthquake, say, you will find out the energy will travel only up to, you see, small, the distances. So these are most important, the observation, you see, people have found out. So like, for example, you see, so Himalayas, say, so this much region only, you see, 7 magnitudes, so maybe 100 kilometer only, the energy will go, or above 100 kilometers, you will not see much damages, or the ground motions, will decay fast actually. But in South India, say, so, same magnitude is same, but the distance, you see, it travels up to larger distances like 200 kilometers or whatever you followed, right? And you can see damages also, like Gujarat, we have seen damages, you see, very, very far away places also. But whereas for Himalayan earthquakes, the damages are confined only to the near regions itself. So this is what, you see, they call as, you see, the high material damping in the Himalayas. Okay. So high material damping. So the damping is very, very high in the Himalayas. But whereas in stable tectonic regions, say the damping is, low. So this is what people have observed. This reason is also same. Like if you see, if you measure the the rocks, say, like for example, if you see our peninsular India, the rocks are very, very old. Very old rocks are there. So these rocks, what happens is, their damping will be, because age is more, their damping will be less only. But in Himalayas, what happens, the rocks whichever you are seeing in Himalayas, say, because it's a tectonic boundary, right? So you will see these type of going, and the new things gets formed or something. So the rocks will be very, very young, and the damping will be very high in these regions. So this people have observed actually. Okay, after once you got lot of amount of data, and then in subduction zones also set. So you can see that these ground motions are entirely the different itself. Not only the energy transmission also. Now in Himalayas, say, to get a 7 magnitude earthquake, less energy is sufficient actually for the fault to rupture. But in peninsular India, say, because the rocks are very old, the stress drop or the energy required to rupture this the fault line will be very high. So stress drops are high, or the energy releases actually. Okay, energy release, they are different. Okay. They are different for same magnitude. So like here I have just showing you followed it, a typical figure. So blue line corresponds to active regions, whereas these things corresponds to stable regions, the red one. And these dotted lines you are seeing, they are all the subduction. You followed. So if you see the topmost line, say, the topmost line corresponds to 7.5, distance is 10. 7.5 distance is 10, 7.5 distance is 10. So now what is that you observe? What is things you observe compared to stable and active regions? So what is that you observe peculiarity in this figure? You see the topmost line. So this line you see in stable region, and you see this line also. Okay, and the stable subduction is somewhere here. What is the pattern you observe here? Striking pattern between stable and active regions. What is that you observe? This is a response spectra. What is your comment on these response spectra? Stable region, active region. South India, Himalaya. The magnitude is same. What is happening to the response spectra? Where it is peaking up.
Stable regions are having more peak in the starting.
Starting means low period means high natural frequency, whereas active
regions are are also same, but more than 0.1 period.
0.1. So what is your comment here? So in South India, you followed, right? If the structures which have very high natural frequencies, say, or very low time periods, they will attract more energy rather than in the Himalayas actually. Okay, so something like that you can make. So there is a huge difference between stable continental data and active regions data itself. So you yourself can check, like in that I showed you, right? That Cosmos or that website, say, you download Gujarat or some South Indian data, Koina data, and then you download, same Uttarkashi, say, Uttarkashi data in Himalaya, more or less same magnitude only, 6.5, 6.9 kind of a thing. And then when you plot both the data sets, say, so you will see that our Koina earthquake or even, our earthquakes which occur in South India, they will be very rich in the high frequency content when you compare it to the stable regions. Now subduction is also, very, very peculiar kind of a thing you have. So now for same magnitude, same distance, which is more dangerous? Stable or active or subduction? For same magnitude, same distance.
Stable.
Stable is more dangerous, okay? But dangerous at where? Dangerous in?
At low time periods.
Low time periods. But when it comes to for this, high time periods, say, okay, so then automatically stable goes down and your, this active region, say, you can see, the amplifications in this region itself. So this was observed in around 1997 or 1990s, say, okay. Previously, people used to combine everything actually, okay. So they used to take, this and that and all kinds of a thing they used to do. So like averages they used to do and others, okay. So now, but that is now thrown out and international community says, so now in Himalayas, say, so it is a guideline. Like if I want to use some GMP in Himalayas, say, okay, so now you should select a region which is similar to Himalaya. You should not use South India data in Himalaya, and you should not use Himalayan data in the South India. Like you see nowadays we are seeing in our master's thesis, right? Some students, their structure will be in South India, but they will download data from Uttarkashi or some other region, and they will use all the they will analyze the structure, and then they talk about this damage and that damage. But South Indian environment is entirely different itself. So if my natural time period of my structure is here, let us say, and I use Himalayan data, say, obviously I will get very less, it will show no damage, because but if I use same South India data, I may get a different, the entire different result itself, you may get it. So this is a very most important thing, so this has been observed. Subduction is different, active is different, then stable is different. And nowadays in subduction also we have so many things are there: inter slab, intra slab, then back arc, fore arc, so many classifications have come into picture itself. So now we have to see now how does the ground motion say. It depends on the magnitude, how it varies with magnitude. So this is a very important thing itself. So now I'm showing you, so this is from the theory, and of course data also will show you. So like x-axis is the magnitude and y-axis is your spectral acceleration basically, okay. So distance is set. So in this graph, distance has been taken as some 10 kilometer or 20 kilometer, and distance of all these things are same, and you just plot the spectral acceleration. So what is that you observe? So as magnitude is increasing, say, what is that you will observe? All spectral accelerations are equally varying, as magnitude increases by 1 unit, say, spectral acceleration also increases by 2 units or 3 units or 4 units or 5 units. What is the pattern you observe here when you look at this graph? So like 4 magnitude, so everything is 1, okay, 1 unit. But when it comes to 8 magnitude, say, which is spectral acceleration is jumping? All are equal or different?
Different.
So now which is the say t 0.05 seconds actual, okay. This is the lowest 0.05. So now as magnitude increases from 4 to 8, that means 8 twice it has become. So magnitude has increased by 2 times, okay. 4 2s are 8. So now how much this has increased? So this is 1, this is 2, and this is approximately, you followed, right, 3 in this graph, 2.5 or 3. So now 0.05 seconds spectral acceleration, say, if magnitude increases by 2 times, this also increases by 2.5 or something like that. But if I take 10 seconds, what is happening for 10 seconds? Now, So as magnitude increases by 2 times, 4 to 8 if it jumps, okay. So like, you know, if you add 4 units to magnitude, how much spectral acceleration is behaving? Now for 4 it was 1 unit actual. Now what is happening? It jumps by how much?
1000 times.
1000 times actually. So you followed, right? Now you know, if you take 0.5 second, you know, if you take 0.2 second, you followed, right? 0.1 second. So you can see as the time period is you know, the increasing, so the time period is increasing set. So t increases. So what is happening with respect to magnitude? Although distance may be same, so you keep distance as same, r is same, okay, but as magnitude is increasing, say what is happening, there are all response spectra are showing same increase or different increases?
Different.
So now you have to be careful as you are increasing the magnitude, say which one will increase huge? Which one increases more number of times?
High time period.
High time period.
High time period actual. Okay, so this is a very, you know, the most important thing. So all response spectra say, okay, so they will not behave in a similar fashion. So if you see response spectrum, say the higher time periods will increase 1000 or 2000 times, whereas lower response spectra say just they will be 2 times or 3 times or something like that itself. Now you tell me what is the comment about PGA? PGA, whether it will increase or decrease, how many times it will go? By looking at this graph, you tell me for PGA. Can you get PGA information from this graph?
We can say PGA will be similar to time period 0.05. It's close to
0.05. Excellent. Okay, that is what we call asymptotic property. So t tends to 0 means ZPA only. So PGA, how much it will increase from 4 to 8?
some 2.5.
2.5 times. Now, of course, the higher frequencies, you know, higher time periods you followed, right? 1000 or 2000 times, you will see entirely difference itself. Okay, so this is a very important thing. So generally, you know, now that is with respect to the magnitude. So your response spectrum, whatever graph you are showing, say, okay, so previously also I showed you why this increases this many times. So previously I have shown you this graph itself, right? We have seen this graph. So why this happens is like this. Where was that Fourier amplitude spectra? Yes, you can see this graph. What has happened here? Now, of course, the x-axis is in hertz, but reciprocal of hertz will be time period itself. Which things are increasing now here? You remember this graph? So, you know, as magnitude increases from 3.1 to 8 actual. How this for you see here? How much is the increase for high frequencies or low time periods? So this is low time period, whereas this is a high time periods actually. Okay. Now can you see here? No. So which is increasing as magnitude increases. So from 3, its amplitude was at high time periods, say, was very low. But whereas same thing, you know, if you take this one, say, huge, you know, increase you will see. But whereas, you know, the PGA, EGA and other things say, so from 3.1 to 8.1 actual. Okay, so you will not see much increases itself. So this graph only. Okay, so we have plotted the, this, 1 second. So this is, I think, with respect to time period. Okay, same graph only. So you can see here. So for 8.1, 5.1 set. So 3.1 to this one. So the jump is huge actual. But whereas here the jump is you know, very small itself. So the scaling basically. So the response spectra, if you see how it scales with respect to magnitude, it depends on the time period. Okay, so this other, so it is not like a uniform, you know, like 3 magnitude. If it is like this, 8 will be, you know, something like this, or 7 will be like this. So equal increase in this doesn't happen in this one. So this is a very important property of the response spectra actual. Okay, so which period gets amplified, although distance may be same, all other things may be same, but the periods will be different itself. Okay, so this is the most important thing you should understand. So somebody if asks you a response spectra, so you can tell that it scaling is entirely different itself. Okay, and now that is with respect to magnitude. So theory also shows, data also you have seen how it means. The data also have shown, data also behaves like that. Mathematical also you can explain actually from wave propagation theory, this happens also. Okay, now why this happens, like theoretically, do you have any answer why this happens? With magnitude, the long periods are getting amplified so much compared to this one. What is the reason from the, what would be the reason for this? Data is showing anyway. So what is the reason for this? Now,
maybe earthquake energy has more means at that time.
No, that is related to what? You are correct only. You have got the point, rupture this one, but you have to this one. See, like for example, Nepal, if you see, say, okay, see, like for example, this can be explained by the rupture area you followed. So generally, if it is a 3 magnitude earthquake, say MW3, some 0.5 kilometer by 0.5 kilometer only the rupture size will be there. Very, very small fault, small piece only will break. Suppose if it is 6 magnitudes, then some 10 into some 5 kilometers, will be the rupture size. For 7 magnitudes, some 70 into 60 kilometers, this much rupture will increase. Now, if it is 8 magnitudes, some 100 by you followed 80 or something will be there. And if it is 9 magnitudes, 500 by say some 100 kilometer. So what is happening as magnitude is increasing? What is happening? The rupture size is also
increase.
Rupture size is also increasing. So rupture size increasing means what is happening? You remember our Fourier spectrum, I have told you what is the lowest frequency present in the signal. So if I give a signal say of duration 10 seconds, what is the lowest frequency present in the signal? And delta t is, let us say, 0.1 second. Okay, what is the lowest frequency? And highest frequency, how much?
1 by capital T.
1 by 10 seconds is the lowest frequency present in the signal. Highest frequency anyway 1 by 2 times delta t. Okay. Now the same concept you can use here. Suppose if I have a duration of 100 seconds, then what is the lowest frequency present in the signal?
1 by 100.
1 by 100. So what does it tells you? As the duration is increasing, say the low frequency, more low frequencies are entering in your time history. So same concept you can give here also. So for 9 magnitude, what is the rupture size? 500 by 100. Okay, so for 6 magnitude, 10 by 5, 70 by 60. So as the area increases, the spatial, this area as it increases, it is like, you have a small rope. Then you have a large rope actually. Okay, so with large rope you can develop very low time periods itself. Okay, as a length of the rope the increases, so that is 1 by length of the rope or something. So here also the same concept applies. That's why this type of scaling you will observe actually. Okay, so it is not like uniform scaling kind of a thing. So you can see huge difference how the scale of this response spectra with time period with respect to magnitude. This is a very important property which you should understand actually. Okay, and now let us see how it depends with the distance actually. So response spectra, if you see same like we have response spectra 0.1 second, 0.2 second, 0.3 second, 10 seconds. Whether what time whether you will see any pattern with the distance, not with respect to the magnitude. Okay, so this I have plotted here. So this is for 0.2 seconds. This graph is for 1 second. This is 6 seconds and this is 3 seconds. Okay, 4 time periods response spectra we have plotted, 5% damping. Now this blue colors say these blue dots are 4 to 5 magnitude, then 5 to 6 magnitude, then 6 to 7 magnitude, then 7 to 8 magnitude. So these are all that European the database itself. Okay, some they have plotted. Now what is the pattern you will observe with respect to distance or whatever? What is that you are going to observe here? So if you see 0.2 second and you see this graph say this end actually. So 6 seconds, what is that you will observe here? Yeah.
PGA is more for t equal to 0.26.
Yeah, see, like for example, anyway, this is more or less close to PGA, let us say, very low time period kind of a thing. What is happening here in the near, suppose if you see distance here in the near field actual, like, up to 10 kilometer distance if I see, say, so 0 is here, 10 is here, so this is my 10 kilometer region. So they are 1 kilometer if you take actual. So this is my near field region. So this entire portion, you see, this portion if I see, and if I see far field actual. So this if I draw like this, say, now what is happening at the 6 seconds. So at 6 seconds, what is happening? So you can see the scatter is high, or here the scatter is high.
In 6 seconds, they're more dispersed.
They're more dispersed kind of a thing you will see with respect to the magnitude. Okay, so this is a very peculiar kind of a graph. What it shows is with respect to distance also you will see these type of dependencies. Of course magnitude is also there, and if you see one graph actual, okay, so like for example if you see this one, so the decay also, if you try to find out with respect to distance, so the decay is entirely different things you will see. This also I will show you one graph here. So this is 0.02 seconds, this is 0.2, and this is 2 seconds actually. So you can see the scatter, like this is a PGA, how this is located here with respect to magnitude, say almost all the magnitudes like 4.5 to 5.5, 5.5 to 6.5, 6.5, all of where is a scatter actually, where scatter is more here or here.
At 2 seconds.
2 seconds, the scatter is very large. You see the scatters you will see, and the decay, see now how if I take a particular magnitudes, it may be decaying like this actual, this line you follow, the decay is, or maybe you see if I put a straight line, so the decay is like this, but here if I put a straight line, say my decay may be, you followed right, somewhere slightly this itself. So what is that you are observing here? So as a time period is for say of course as distance is increasing, all are decreasing only. That pattern everybody observes. Okay, as the distance increases 1000 kilometer, and if you compare 10 kilometer, obviously the ground motion will be same irrespective of the time period, but how they are decaying, say, that is controlled by our time period also. So response spectrum also, the spectral acceleration, say, so their decay is different, and you will get different things if you compare with you see this itself, the time period. So this is a very important the observations. So now so the same data, say if they plot with respect to magnitude, so this is for pseudo spectral acceleration, I think they have 0.02 seconds, then this is 0.2, and this is 2 seconds kind of a thing. So they say that the data you see with magnitude, say some kind of a bilinear curve or something, you see they say actually. Okay, so that how people say is they fit some type of equation, is a hinge magnitude, they say the hinge where this goes away. See this graph, say whatever I showed you previously. So in practice what one does is they do a bilinear fit actually. So like this, then a straight line. So bilinear fit they do. So like for 10 seconds, say, so this is also bilinear. After some point it becomes you see like this. So we predict, so we all of them you see they plot like this. Okay, this is a bilinear curve, like our elastoplastic, even in our steel and everywhere you see we use this type of thing. So other things, say, so like this. So if it is a higher time period, say like this actually, small this one, say it will be like this. So this portion, say where your slope is changing, so this they call as the hinge magnitude, like yielding stress or whatever we say, right? It's a hinge magnitude. So this hinge magnitudes increases with respect to the time period actually. So you can see from these graphs, and the same thing has been observed from the data. So people fit like this actually, hinge magnitude, mh, they write. So if I fit some type of equation to this data, say a plus b into because these are all straight lines only, no need to fit these are all two straight lines, you can see, you followed right, these are all straight lines. With less than reference, one straight line, m refer to mh, one other straight line, another straight line, etc. So three straight lines can be fitted with respect to magnitude, and if you fit, say, with the distance also some functional form, you can see. So this mh, okay, so if you see this graph, so he has reported in that paper, so hinge magnitude actually. So most important thing is here, So now as hinge magnitude, as the time period is increasing, what is happening to this hinge magnitude? For 2 seconds, what is the hinge? See this column.
Increases.
6.46.
So what is happening? The hinge magnitude is increasing with respect to the time period. They have a bilinear curve, if you do say. So this is related to that famous thing itself I showed you. Okay, so this is a very important, you see, the observations. Not only for that one, this is I think some US data they have done. So 0.2 seconds say. So with respect to magnitude, they say you can fit a bilinear curve like this. You followed. So this is what is a bilinear curve they do. Now for 2 seconds or 10 seconds say. So this is my bilinear curve. So you have a hinge magnitude and then you fit something like this actually. So bilinear. So how magnitude how the ground motion depends with respect to magnitude. So whether it is whatever maybe PGA, GGA or whatever. So of course it is a complicated, but what is our assumption? Every time with respect to magnitude, how it varies? Yeah, how it varies with respect to magnitude?
Linear.
Linear but bilinear curve. Okay. So generally bilinear is the one which somebody fits a quadratic also, like you see you can do whatever way mx square or something also, but generally bilinear things people use actually. Okay, so this is how the curves they look like, quadratic or bilinear or something they fit. Okay, and now so magnitude we have seen, distance we have seen. Okay, so now now what other things comes into picture? Say if you plot the error, you have fitted equation with respect to magnitude, bilinear, and with the distance, that complicated forms. If you do itself, you will see large amount of variance, that is the error in the data after fitting the equations. When you observe this thing, you will find out very interesting, the parameters will come into picture. So one I will just show you the scatter actual. Okay, that is a scatter or remaining after removing magnitude and the distance actual. So this is very large, so we would like to reduce our followed rate. Or the scatters you can we found out any some more information from this data. So it appears this site response say. So this also is a very important parameter. So like for example, you can see all the data. So this is a scatter. So you have a data, we have fitted some kind of a equation, bilinear for magnitude and some exponential thing for distance. You have fitted to the data and then you have subtracted this. So you have got this type of a scatter actual. Okay, so this is observation. So some 450 observations or something is there. So if you plot, say the data looks like this. Can you observe any pattern here? Yeah, so any pattern you can observe from this data?
Most of the data lines.
No.
No, there is no pattern, but the same data say, if you do like this actually, you separate them into soil and then you separate them into rock. Now what is the pattern you are observing? Just the errors only, whatever error you are having, all soil errors you make into some red color and you make rock this blue color. So now what is the pattern you observe? Now what is the pattern you are observing here?
Mean error of soil is
Soil is you followed, right, is higher than the rock itself. So what does it tells you? So the mean value is here and this mean value of rock is somewhere here itself. So if you add one constant, say, okay, like you see some constant which it tells soil or rock or one more coefficient, then you can make this error looks like this also. You followed. So this also people have observed that not only magnitude and distance say, so even this soil, so this also plays a very important role people have observed and they have included actually. So now how do we characterize a soil? There are several generally in our geotechs, how do they characterize soil? So like what do they routinely do in geotechnical engineering? Or if you are constructing a house foundation, so how do they characterize soil? What do first thing what do they do?
With respect to size,
No, what is the first test they do? How do they characterize soil in practice?
EBR test.
Which one?
EBR, California rate.
CBR, California, but for that, what do they do first? Then what do they do generally? In all multi-story buildings, also, right? The first test they do is
SBC.
huh?
Net loading.
Repeat once again. SPC. What is the first thing they do in soil geotech? You remember SPT? What is SPT?
Standard penetration.
Standard penetration, you remember, right? They do drilling, borehole, you follow, right? They will give the number of blows, like that they do. So that is what generally now also everybody does for multi-story buildings, that is a mandatory, some 2 borehole, 3 borehole, right? Our metropolitan department, right? So they give this type of a guideline. So they characterize soil by N value. So generally, N value. So right, in our IS code also, we have a mentioning of stiff soil. You remember that response spectra, whatever you see in our IS code, say. So it is like this. You follow. Then some other soils, type 2, type 3 soil, it is like this. How our IS code characterizes soil, IS 1893. You remember that hard soil, stiff soil, type 1, type 2, type 3, our IS code gives. But you remember, right? What is that? So that classification comes from N value only. So if N value, I think, is more, right, some 50 or 30 or something, they say it is a rock type actually. If it is between 10 to 30, as I don't remember, you can see the code book, like IS 1893. So they say it is a type 2. Then if it is less than 10 or less than something, it is a very, very loose kind of a thing. So it is a type 3 soil, like that, So we have a site classification. So generally the site classification, everybody does by the SPT actually. But generally in our earthquake engineering, say, or the international codes, if you see, they define in terms of the shear wave velocity of the soil. This is the one which is widely used in the international codes. But in our Indian codes, still we go by SPT itself. And of course, there are people have found out actually, like the SPT and relationships between N value, VS also, there are some studies are there. Okay, but anyway, so this is what they calculate as a shear wave velocity. The shear wave velocity is anyway, it's a velocity, depth, distance to time. So this is standard equation they use. So Z is the depth of the this one. So they integrate and then they get these types of numbers itself. So the average shear wave velocity, they say. Okay, so now this is what they say. So like you see, our classification say. So this is NEHRP classification they say. So here they define like this. So VS 30 up to 30 meter depth you have to take. So the assumption is the soil in the top 30 meter only will influence the response. Below 30 meters, because anyway a lot of burden will be there, overburden pressure or something. The soil also behaves as a rock, they say, that doesn't have any effect. So this is some empirical, the guideline is 30 meter depth itself. So if it is 1500 meter per second, so we say it is a A-type rock actually, okay, which means very, very hard, the rock itself. Then 760 to 1500, say. So they call this as soft rock. So these are some terminologies. Okay. Then we have stiff soil. So C type means a stiff soil they call. Then this is a medium kind of a thing. Then E type means it is like a very loose you follow it, soil and liquefaction and all kinds of things are there. Okay, the top this one. So they do like this the site classification. And generally people sometimes in many textbooks also they say rock means 620, also they use soil means 310 also. So there are a lot of the guidelines are there, soil, rock or something like that also they do. Okay, so this classification is there. So now what people have found out is the data, whatever data you see now, this is for 0.1 second, this is for 2 seconds, and if you plot with respect to VS30, say the shear wave velocity, now what is happening? So for 0.1 second, say when the shear wave velocity is increasing from 200 to 1000 actual, how much is the increase? Can you see here this line, how much is the increase? And if you take 2 seconds actual, how much is the increase? See what is happening as shear wave velocity increases, say what is happening to the value? What is happening to the data? So as the shear wave velocity increases, low shear wave velocity means it is a soil, loose soil. So this is a rock actually, the high hard rock kind of a thing. So when you are moving from soil to rocks, what is happening to the amplitudes? Decreasing or increasing?
Decreasing.
But
High.
decay is decreasing only. But if I compare 0.1 and for 2 seconds, where decay is high?
2 seconds.
2 seconds is at rock, same distance, same magnitude, same epicentral distance. If it is 1 unit actually at a rock site, at very hard rock site, now in the soil set, how much it is got amplified? If it is a loose soil, it gets amplified by 4 times.
4
actually.
times.
But whereas here 0.1 second actually, if you see here the amplification is 1 say, okay, the value is 1, but when it comes to soil set, how much is this amplification? 1 to how much is this value? Approximately it is
1.5.
1.5. So you can see. So now here also, what is the pattern you are seeing? Magnitude, we have seen a different pattern. The distance, we have seen a different pattern. As a soil, rock and soil say. So here also response spectra. So as you go from rock to soil, the high natural time periods, essentially the high natural time periods. You followed, right? They will amplify very high. So amplification is high for high natural time periods. You followed, right? Very high for high natural time periods, the values will be very large. But whereas low time periods or PGA or whatever, you will not see, you followed, right, much the amplification or something, whereas others, they will have amplification 4 times or 5 times or 6 times also, it happens actually. Okay, so now you can see. So now to summarize, say, so our PGA or the spectral acceleration. So we have observed that our spectral acceleration, say, it varies with magnitude, which is this one, and it varies with the distance also. Distance means RJB or RAP or whatever things are there. Then it is also varies with respect to VS30, that is the soil. So 3 things are the major actual: magnitude, distance, and the site condition. Okay, so these are the 3 independent variables or something, and these are the 3 majority actually. Apart from that also, you can say that your PGS, it depends on, we have said, like how many types of faults are there, you remember long back I told you. Now see how many types of faults are there.
Mainly 3.
3 are there. So now you can ask, you can say here also, suppose if same earthquake occurs as strike slip, you may get a different answer. If the same earthquake occurs as a thrust, you will get different answer. If the same earthquake occurs as an oblique slip or some other complicated focal mechanisms, that also will be different. So sometimes what people have done is they have tried to include that also, like a focal mechanism or the fault mechanism also. But this you followed, right? Now also, some people use some of them, because the data is very less, say. So we use this, sometimes it is not used also, but international equations, they include this term also. Okay, so now this is how the data looks like actually. So now I am showing you here. So now as the data is increasing, say, so this is, I think, the recent data set, that is NGA West. So I suggest all of you, you have to download this database. Okay, NGA West, it is Excel sheet is available in online. So for NGA West data means you will get this flat file. Okay, all of you please download this one. So this is a flat file set. So that is this is the data from all active regions. So all the active regions on Earth, like many plate boundaries, so they have accumulated and they have done a nice flat file, which anybody can use to do for research purposes. So it has like 13,500 data they have filtered, and they have done a lot of work itself. Okay, so this is the data looks like that. Okay, so magnitude and distances. So nowadays so we have very good high quality of data itself. So what I suggest to all of you is, you please download this data from NGA West flat file set. So you plot the data. Okay, so they will give you the response spectra, all the details are there. So you have to plot them. So I will just show you. So all of you followed, right? NGA West 2 database. Okay, the flat file. So if you click this, you can go to this itself. So you have, I think, the flat file. So you can see, right, NGA West 2. Where is the flat files? Yes. So you can see, so this is a flat file, okay, West to database flat file. You can see this one, the first one, updated NGA West to flat file of 5% damped vertical ground motion they will give you, and these are the part 1, part 2 say. I think they may be the horizontals actual, okay. So you please download this data set itself, and then it contains this data set, it contains all the details itself. Let me just update it. So if you download this data set, so you can see all the variety files will be there. So what you people have to do is to download this data. So whatever I showed you, say you plot the data with respect to magnitude, with respect to distance, and all those calculations have to be done, and you plot all those things, and you yourself observe, say, the patterns, how the data varies with magnitude, distance, and others also. Where is the data? No. So you can see this database. No, so if you see the desktops. No, so it is opening, I think. So they have given vertical, I am showing you, but you can download all other things itself. So you can see here, you are able to see. Yeah. So this is a Montana earthquake. Okay, so this occurred year anyway is not important for us. The station is not important. So you can see earthquake magnitude they have defined. So this is a 6 magnitude actual. Okay, so there is a magnitude uncertainty also that they show you. But anyway, for our thing that is not important, you can take the earthquake magnitude. They have given the strike angle, dip angle, rake angle, this one also. Okay, the hypocenter also they will give you. But anyway, yeah, now you can see. See what is the first here, the column. So you can see here depth to the top of the fault rupture they will give, fault rupture length also they will give, fault area also they will give you, and finally stress drop. So many things they give you, but anyway we are not interested here. Now you see here the distances. What is the distances they have given here? What is the first one? You can see here.
Epicentral distance.
Then next one is
hypocentral distance.
Then you have RJB, you follow joiner Bohr. Then other thing is Campbell distance, that is RRUP they will give you. Then RMS they will give you, closest distance they will give you RX. Now you can see huge differences. Epicentral distance is 73, hypocentral is 74, joiner is 71. You can get variety of these numbers itself. Okay, so now which one you have to use?
RJB.
RJB, of course, which is best means there is no answer. Okay, so RJB you can take. Okay, so magnitude is there, RJB is there. Now if you go to this data set, say, okay, so you go to all other columns will be there, and now you can see here this column. So what is this quantity?
Shear wave velocity.
Shear wave velocity, or they will give you any HRP also. Okay, that A, B, C, D I told you, D. So VS30 also they have given you, and the magnitude is there, distance is there. And finally, what they will give you in this flat file say is, if you go to this one, basin, geese, so many, the names of the files, everything they give you. Okay, so finally lowest frequency. Now you can see this column. You have a PGA, that is a P ground acceleration, P ground velocity, P ground displacement. Then this is what is this quantity? T 0.01 second. This is spectral acceleration actually. So these are all spectral accelerations. 0.01, 0.02 like this. I think they will give up to so if you keep on this Excel sheet say, I think they will go up to 100 values or something. Yes. So they have given up to how many seconds?
20 seconds.
20 seconds they have given you. So now what all of you have to do is just take this flat file. I have downloaded vertical, you download the other flat file, the horizontals, anything you can take. Okay, so you plot all this data say, you know the x-axis, you know the y-axis, magnitude, distance, VS30, you plot all of them actually, okay, with the data. I think how much data sets, if you see here, a huge database this is. So, let me go to this one. So if you see this database, say, so now you can see how many are there. If you try to see here, 852. If I do, now, so if you see here, how many data points are there? Okay. Now, see how many are there totally? 21,540 earthquake data sets are there. You followed. So what I suggest all of you is you download this database and then you plot all the patterns. Okay, then only you will be able to understand in a nice fashion. Is it fine? So all of you can be able to download, right?
Yes, sir.
No. So what you have to do? You download all the data. You plot all these functional forms. How things varies with respect to VS30. How things varies with respect to magnitude, and how things varies with respect to distance. And distance also you verify. You plot with respect to RJB, how it looks like. If you plot RRUP, what it looks like. If you plot epicentral, hypocentral, say, what is the things itself. So you will have a nice feeling, for the database itself. Okay, so you download. And of course, as I told, our Indian data, that is available. We don't have such type of a nice flat files. But international communities, they give this type of flat file, and every country has a nice flat file. See, like New Zealand has excellent flat file. Europeans have, then NGA West, many countries are there. India we don't have, but this data is a very well studied, and all of you, I suggest all of you to download, and then you should plot all these things. That itself is your next assignment. Okay, so and you have to write some comments also. So why it is increasing, why it is not increasing, say that you have to do itself. Okay, now, so anyway, so that is how you see. So the database looks like this. So generally whenever there is a large amount of data, what is that you try to do? See, like PGA, 21,540 samples are there. What you will do when you have large amount of data? The first thing what anybody does is, when somebody gives
Try
you a
to
lot
fit a
of
curve.
data, say, you find out.
You try to fit a curve.
No, fit a curve is different. That fit a curve comes next. Suppose somebody has given you data, say, what is that you will try to do? And the data is uncertain, so many numbers are there. You will find the first thing is you find out
Random distribution.
Mean value. Probability density is different, okay, but generally like in our engineering, so we calculate mean value, median value, standard deviation, sometimes kurtosis, skewness, minimum value of the data, maximum value of the data. So something like that, this is the first basic thing we do in any data analysis. So like for the NGA data, the minimum value is 3.5 magnitude, 7.9. So mean is this much, median is this much. You can get all these numbers itself. Okay, and now all of you know, right? If the data is a normal distribution, say, we all know that you would have studied skewness should be 0. That means it should be perfectly a symmetric graph actually. And kurtosis, say, that is the fourth moment, should be 3 itself. Now when you look at this earthquake data, say, what is the skewness value you are getting? So anywhere it is 0 skewness.
No, sir.
No, and kurtosis is also anywhere near 3.
No, sir.
So what does it tells you? Your earthquake data is Gaussian, or that is normal, or not normal?
No, sir.
It is not a normal distribution at all. You followed, right? Generally in our engineering, what we do whenever somebody gives a data, say, we fit mean value, standard deviation, and we use normal distribution actually. Okay, so this is the first step also we do. So our earthquake data, say, they are not the normal distributions at all actually. Okay, so that makes the things very, very complicated. Even the regression is also very complicated. See, linear regression, the assumption is, the linear regression. So the main assumption is the data has to be normal actually. Then only you can do a linear regression. Right? This thing. Y is equal to, if I take, C1 x1 plus C2 x2 plus C3 x3. Like if I have several random variables, to say, what will be the probability density function of Y? Have you done a probability course? If you have done probability course, there is one mathematical thing is theorem, central limit theorem. What is central limit theorem? Have you heard?
Some of the distributions leads to a normal distribution.
So if you have several random variables, if you add all of them, the sum goes towards a Gaussian distribution. Okay, so that is how linear regression, the main assumption is the data has to be normal. Now earthquake data, whether it is normal,
No.
No, sir.
it is not normal. So you have to do all these non-linear regression or some special extra things we have to consider itself. Okay, so anyway, I will stop here. I will we will continue the next class. But in the meantime, say, so Indian data you would have downloaded, got all the parameters. Now you please download this flat file and then we plot all these things itself. Okay, fine. So if you have any questions.